Good morning, and welcome to Ark and Dove Presbyterian Church in Odenton, Maryland. I'm Brian Boudreau, the Clerk of Session at Ark and Dove, and your host here in the lobby, the weekly segment on new happenings of the church. Thank you for joining us today. This Sunday is Trinity Sunday. We're going to try something a little new. I have two guests with me. Music director Margaret McGillivray and contemporary music director Pat Sise will be here to talk to us about their jobs and how that's changed in the age of the pandemic. But first, let's get to our announcements. Maryland is moving on to phase 2 of the reopening plan. Ark and Dove is trying to get there, but we are not ready to host in-person service just yet. We want to hear your voice because it is through the congregation that we decide how we meet together. Please contact admin at Ark and Dove to register for a listening session. We have sessions scheduled for June 10th at 7 p.m., June 11th at 9 a.m., June 12th at 1 p.m., June 16th at 7 p.m., or June 18th at 6 p.m. The Healing Through Grief group will be meeting this Wednesday, June 10th at 7 p.m. Please contact Pastor Tim or Lenny Gardner for an invitation. In light of recent events, Pastor Tim and Pastor John will be holding a special small group reading of the cross and the lynching tree. This will be on June 23rd at 7 p.m. So please contact one of the pastors to receive a Zoom invitation. Also, it's not too late to participate in the virtual children's choir. They will be singing Jesus Loves Me. We'll talk a little more about this when we talk to Margaret in just a minute. The deadline for submissions is Monday, June 15th, so you will contact Margaret to get a copy of the music. Summer is coming, and that means Vacation Bible School. This year, obviously, will be different. It will be a 5-week distance program themed on earth as in heaven. There will be activities for the whole family. So we need parent and team volunteers to help us as well. So contact Christina Nelson or Linda Lewis to sign up or find out more information. There are a lot of youth and adult activities still going on at this time. So please be sure to check out the archive every Friday or the webpage at any time for a listing of those events. All right, now for something different, and so I hope this goes well, I have two guests with me, Pat Sise and Margaret McGillivray. This will be our first time trying to do a panel discussion, so fingers crossed. Margaret, welcome to the program. How are you and your family doing?
Hi, Brian. We're doing pretty well, all things considered. As you might imagine, having 3 kids and homeschooling and distance learning and all those things, it's been pretty hectic. But all things considered, I think it's actually going really well.
Great. And Pat, thank you for joining us. How have you been doing in the age of COVID?
It's my pleasure to be here. Doing well, just like Margaret is, I think. Just kind of hanging in there, like everybody else too. Teaching online a lot, and of course, doing a lot to prepare for Sunday streaming services with the band recordings and whatnot. And definitely missing the stage, though. I haven't had a
Yeah.
gig in a long time, so that's I can't wait for that to be back up and running.
Oh, I hope sooner rather than later. Now, Margaret, tell us. I talked a little bit earlier about the virtual children's choir. What more can you tell us about that?
So, the virtual children's choir is actually me putting my toes into something I haven't quite done before. You've been seeing videos of the choir doing anthems and hymns, but we've been using a special app for that. The children's choir, though, is my first true virtual choir. And what we're hoping is that as many children in the church who are happy and willing will come out and sing a verse of Jesus Loves Me. We'll get video of all of them, and then Ryan Stapley and I are going to sync them all up, hopefully, and put it together and present it in worship on June 21st.
Okay, so I hope that a lot of people sign up for this because this could be a really fun event for all the children, and especially since they haven't been in church in a long time. This is a great way of connecting everyone together. So thank you. I wanted to have both of you on the program for a while now because I don't think everybody understands sort of the kinds of adjustments that you both have had to make and in different ways. Margaret, how have things changed for you in creating the music for your service?
Wow. Okay. So it's almost like how it hasn't changed might be easier to describe. I've gone from not really knowing anything about production and sound recording and whatnot to basically having to do it every week on a full scale, even just for a hymn. We're currently using an app called Acapella to record hymns, and I can record up to nine squares in a grid. So that's nine different parts, either nine voices or eight voices in piano. So that's what you've been seeing most often from me on a Sunday. Now, Ryan and I did get a little bit creative with our past Sunday, and we actually combined four different grids to create a huge anthem. And we're probably going to look forward to doing that again. Unfortunately, it requires a fair amount of time and coordination, so it's not something we can do every week. But it's been actually kind of fun to try something new and try it with people that are game to do it. That's been awesome that people have really jumped on board as much as they possibly can.
Yeah. And Pat, you've had to take a completely different approach then. What is the band doing now to create music?
Well, it's not a completely different approach, I'd say, but we're having to record as well. It's just that I have a lot more instruments to record as well as voices, whereas Margaret's dealing with a lot of times it's piano and then having to get all the voices, which is really difficult to do when the voices are that exposed. So we have some instruments to hide behind every now and then, but yeah. So we've been recording instruments, everything separate. So what I have to do is after I pick the music, I record what's called a scratch track, which is where I'm recording basically a broken down version of the songs that we're going to play, very skeleton like, and I'll even program a drum track into the recording software that we use so that everyone can record their parts to a metronome click to make sure that we're all syncing up well when we record separately. And really the process is we record rhythms first. So we're going to record drums, and then we do bass. Then we're going to have piano in there. My guitar will be in there already since it's in the scratch track. And then we get other instruments like violin. And then after that, we'll start doing voices. And typically we try to do the main voice first. So I'll usually have a main vocal part of the melody part in the scratch track so that if someone like Adele can't record until later, people who are singing harmonies a lot, like Kim Champagne and Karen Dodson, are able to hear the melody so that they know what we need to sing. And we work together to get that going. So basically recording everything individually, and then I take it home during the week, and then I have to go through and edit things, which means there might be some takes that are better than others, and I'll edit them in to get in a better take or a better section of a take. And then I have to get them sounding nice so that there's no gaps between those takes. And then I have to go through and add any extra instruments. An example was when we did Unstoppable God, I had about 30 tracks in there, which included voice, extra synthesizers, strings, all sorts of stuff was in there. So I had to go through and make sure to program the right notes for those instruments. And then I also have to edit and mix, which means I have to listen to the song about 1,000 times, it feels like, and dial in the levels of how loud is the melody going to be, how loud is this instrument here, can I hear what's happening with this layer, and then I master it.
Do you have experience with mixing before this?
Yeah, but the most experience I've had with mixing has mainly been with the bands that I play in, and anytime that we have demos that we've recorded. I mean, I record all the time when I have music that I'm writing and I want to send out to my bandmates. So, yeah, I'm dealing with mixing all the time, and you learn a lot just recording. I've learned a lot just working with the sound engineer that I record with, who lives in Middle River, just from being in his studio and him being really a professional. He's always just given me tips and pointers, and I've always just kind of watched what he does too. So being in the recording studio has helped me a lot just with working on being able to dial in a sound better and to get it to sound really nice.
Sure. Pat, can you give us maybe a little peek of what's in store for some of the musical pieces coming up?
Yeah, so I can give you a little bit of a peek into this Sunday. In light of kind of what's been occurring, I kind of chose songs that aren't exactly having to do with Trinity Sunday, but they are absolutely about the Spirit. and one of those is "Breathe" by The Brilliants, which is a band that Michael Gungor, Lisa Gungor, and David Gungor, who are some of my favorite Christian artists. They wrote this song for their band called The Brilliants, and it deals a lot with not necessarily letting people breathe on you, especially during the COVID pandemic, but about letting the spirit in, and letting the spirit in to change. And one of the lyrics is to heal this broken ground, and that's kind of the reason why I did it. But it's a really somber piece, and it can feel quite tragic, but it's an emotional tune.
Margaret, could you maybe give us a little peek into what's in store, what you've been thinking about trying to do?
I've been thinking about a lot of things. So what's really great about this congregation is that it's very deep in terms of the musical talent and education that's gone on. And I'm really looking forward to the summer, especially, and going forward, this has always kind of been a mission of mine, is to get as many people involved as however they can be involved, basically. So I'm really looking forward to having some youth performing prelude and postlude music. In terms of the choir, we're looking at a couple of really interesting anthems for the summer. And then we're also looking at having some soloists. And the first soloist is actually going to be on June 14th, and it's going to be my brother. And it's just kind of neat that we can actually do this because he lives in Sudbury, Ontario, about 4.5, 5 hours north of Toronto. And I don't get to see him very often. And right now the borders are closed to non-essential travel. So this is a way for us to collaborate and stay close. And he's going to be singing The Call from Vaughan Williams' five mystical songs. And if you're at all into like crazy classical music, you might have heard this tune before. It's actually in the Presbyterian Church in Canada's hymnal. It's a beautiful hymn. So it's neat that I get to collaborate with him. And then the choir anthems that we have coming up, we've got a really neat anthem by Pepper Choplin, and there might be a guest soloist, a surprise guest soloist for that one, so stay tuned. And I'm looking at doing an adult virtual choir. With the a cappella app, I can do a lot of the same things that Pat can do. I just can't refine it quite as much. And the emphasis is on the individual people in the choir to record their own things. So in order to keep everybody safe, and they've been recording at home and just having to figure it out. So one of the things I didn't know I'd ever do is become sort of an IT person where I'm helping people over the phone figure out how to record their parts and not have distortion, and trying to get the best sound they can possibly get out of it. Oh yeah, and then singing by themselves and feeling really exposed. So I'm hoping to actually do an actual virtual choir where we can change tempos, because that's one of the really big things about a thing like a cappella. Once you put on that click track and you're hearing the metronome in your ear, you can't really move the tempo. You can't slow down and speed up and pause. You can maybe do it just at the very end of a hymn. So if with a virtual choir, I might be able to do a lot more interesting musical things. And for that, I'm looking at Randall Thompson's Alleluia, and perhaps having the choir joined by some guests from, well, heck, we can go all over the world. One of the neat things about this process is that it actually lends itself well to people who are maybe not able to attend choir during the year. For whatever reason, they've got work obligations, things going on Thursday nights, they can't come to rehearsal. But we literally can draw from whoever has a phone and earbuds to do this. And it's just kind of it's a neat way to open up the choir in ways that we never thought possible.
Well, I really love that you guys are like thinking outside the box, thinking of different opportunities. That's really great. Of course, concert venues have canceled shows through the rest of the year. There's been a great deal of research on, singing and the spread of the virus. So on a kind of serious note, what does live music look like then at Ark and Dove as we start to transition to in-person worship? Margaret, you want to respond?
This is a great question, and I've been getting this a lot from people who weren't sort of in the midst of all of this. Like, I'm reading all the research as soon as it comes out, and I have lots of choir director friends, and I'm a member of the American Choral Directors Association, and also just as a wind player myself, we've been watching this with basically the same concerns on our minds. I have a feeling that live music going forward will be a lot of instrumental, and probably not even a lot of wind players. I'm thinking strings, guitar, piano. The ACDA, of which I'm a member, is actually funding a bunch of studies, and hopefully their replication studies this summer. Hopefully we know more in September about what's safe to do and what we can do, because there's been so much emphasis on what we shouldn't do or can't do with all these unknowns. And hopefully we'll know more in the fall about what we can do safely. We just really want to act with the utmost caution to keep everybody as safe as we possibly can. And we understand that at some point we're going to have to assume some risks. But if we can mitigate those risks as much as possible, I hope we'll try. But yeah, a lot of instrumental, which, that's not so bad either.
Not so bad. Pat, have you thought about this at all?
Yeah, I've thought about it. It's really similar. I mean, I think Margaret and I are both together in the way we want to approach returning to things, and I think right now it is more important right now safety above all else, and we have gotten a lot of really good feedback about positive feedback about the recordings that we're doing. So even though it's still not as personal and it's not as one-on-one as we can get as we would like it with live music, but at least people are still enjoying it, and that makes us happy for sure, because we still want to enrich our worship service with great music, and we're glad that people are enjoying it. But I think I'm definitely right on the same page with Margaret when it comes to how we're going to deal with reopening and eventually, like she said, take some risks maybe. But I think more important is everyone's safety, and we still have an outlet that we know works well to still have great music for worship services for now. But I would say one thing that I've thought about a little bit outside of the box is maybe when we get back a little bit more back to normal, or things start to open back up with the church, maybe we can do a sing along that's outdoors or something, where people are less exposed to things, to the moisture in the air and stuff like that, or something like that. But overall, we want to make sure that everyone's safe.
And
Well,
just to add that we've actually been doing so many recordings. We're making this library. Like we have a whole new kind of music library that we never had before. We've always had like all the octavos in my office and lead sheets and things like that. But we're making a whole new library of our people making music that we'll have to draw on. And we'll have those as long as we want them, like as long as nobody hits the delete button. Um, we'll have this great resource and treasure that we can use in all kinds of creative ways in worship and outside of worship.
well, obviously, music is such an important part of Ark and Dove and our worship. So I want to thank you both for joining me today. There's a lot to think about there, and I know you guys are on the forefront of our reopening strategy. So I hope to have you guys back soon as we talk about this. There's so much more to talk about on this topic. So thank you for sharing your musical gifts with us and leading us into this new transition. And thank you for tuning in today. The live streaming service will begin momentarily. I will see you next week. And until then, stay healthy and wear a mask. Have a blessed week.